Red Glass, Chapter 10, Part 2. Pablo studied my eyes, then the tablecloth, then my eyes, and finally nodded, serious. See, Angel said, I would never have to ask what color your eyes are, Sophie. I didn't know what to say, but at that moment the girl came to our table to take our order. Angel and I got Coronas with lime and 3 picaditas apiece, and Pablo got 2 picaditas and some atole. While we were waiting, Pablo said in Spanish, in his most angelic voice, Por favorcito, can I touch your box? Angel made a show as if he were thinking about it, and finally nodded. Pablo brushed his hands along the edge and poked his pinky finger into the keyhole. Can I hold it? Angel moved his head close. You can shake it. Pablo picked it up as though it were made of glass. But only 3 times, Angel said, and gently. Pablo held it next to his ear and shook it once. No rattle, no clink, just the soft whisper of something hitting the side. Paper, maybe. He shook it twice more, then laid it back on the table and looked at it, thinking hard. Can I open it? He asked. Angel shook his head. Only I open it, and I won't open it till Guatemala. After you come back from Guatemala, can we see what's inside? I asked. He didn't say anything. Our food came and Pablo pounced on it. As we ate, a few curious people stopped by our table, full of questions. What are you doing all the way down here? Are you from El Norte? Do you speak English? How long will you stay? What do you think of our pueblo? I have a brother working in Chicago, a sister in LA, a son-in-law in Washington, and on and on. We got an invitation to 2 weddings and a 15-year-old's birthday party, all of which we declined since we'd be leaving for Pablo's village the next day. Angel had a second beer, and then I did too, and then Pablo licked the last bits of grease off his fingers and slumped asleep in his seat. The streets grew emptier, and we were the only customers left. We sat in the smoke, talking. I realized all of a sudden that I hadn't squeezed any lime on my picaditas, but my stomach felt fine. After our second beers were done, everyone else had left, and the stout woman and her daughter started to clean up. Angel picked up Pablo and laid him over his shoulder. Will you carry my box, Sophie? He asked. And I felt honored, even though he kept glancing over to make sure I had a good grip. The plastic bag containing my dress was securely looped over my wrist. On our way back to the hotel, the streets were almost deserted. I felt light as a leaf. The world moved around me like a series of photos. Angel's arm muscles, Angel's hand on Pablo's hair, street lamp reflections in Angel's sunglasses, the glow on his cheeks, fantastical animal bushes in the background. I tilted my head back and looked at the sky. Did you know you can buy your own star? Really? I saw an ad once. It's $34.95 per star, and you can name it after yourself. You get a certificate and a star chart and everything. I'd pick that one, he said, pointing with his chin, right over the tip of that church steeple. I'd pick the one next to it, I said, just to the right. I looked at Angel's face, and then, in one swift, impulsive movement, pushed his sunglasses up on his head. He couldn't stop me because his arms were holding Pablo. His face looked naked. Angel, tell me the truth, I said. Are you staying in Guatemala for good? He kept looking at the sky, but I could still see his eyes, how they crinkled around the edges as if the moonlight were too bright for him. I think so, Sophie. I think so. The sky looked huge, and I thought of how our stars were so tiny and giant at the same time. I felt very melodramatic, like Dika, and inside my head, I asked how one particular star, which until last week used to be like any other star, could suddenly matter so much. Back in the courtyard, the lights were off in Dika's and my room. She must be asleep, I whispered to Angel. I opened the metal door slowly so that it wouldn't clank too much, and Angel followed me in to put Pablo down. Once our eyes adjusted to the dark, we saw the room was empty. Angel pulled back the blanket and laid Pablo on the sheets. He unlaced Pablo's shoes and pulled them off gently, then tucked the covers around his neck. "Where's Dika?" Angel asked in a low voice. Our heads were close, and I breathed in his skin, which still smelled like sunshine and sweat and dusty stone from earlier today. Maybe they went out for food. I wondered if he noticed the warmth of my breath, or maybe. He walked out the door into the courtyard, and I followed. The light was on in Mr. Lorenzo's room. The windows were open, the thin curtain over the window blowing in slow motion in the breeze. We glimpsed through the window Mr. Lorenzo and Dika sitting close on the bed. It was as though they were lit up on stage and we were hidden in the wings. They appeared to be getting dressed, leaning over to slip on shoes. Mr. Lorenzo's chest was bare. It looked more solid and compact than I would have expected. Dika wore a cropped spaghetti-strap tank top that exposed thick beige bra straps at her shoulders and rolls of tanned fat hanging over the waist of her white capri pants. Of course, I'd seen her in a bikini and usually looked away, but now my eyes felt glued to this scene. Mr. Lorenzo took Dika's neatly folded shawl from a chair and wrapped it around her shoulders. They stared at each other. They looked like creatures from two different species, a sea lion and a basset hound, a hippo and a chipmunk. Angel said, "You shouldn't be looking at this." But I was transfixed. Now Dika was holding out her arm, showing Mr. Lorenzo the inside of her elbow. I knew what they were looking at. 3 parallel scars across the inside of her arm. "Scars from the prison camp," I said. Angel was watching them intently now, too. Mr. Lorenzo moved his thick fingers across the scars, then pulled Dika's inner arm up to his face and brushed his lips against them. He seemed to be kissing each scar, and then he turned so that his back was facing her. She moved her face close, then far from it, the same way she squinted at maps. She brushed her fingers, weighted with cheap rhinestone rings, slowly over his shoulders, down the curve of his backbone. "His scars," Angel said, "what the soldiers did to him." "What did they do?" I asked. He shook his head, said nothing. Dika put the flannel shirt on Mr. Lorenzo and buttoned it up, starting from the hem. Angel shivered. "They tortured him, burned him with cigarettes, cut him with knives." His voice cracked. "Look, they're coming out. Pretend we didn't see. Pretend we're talking about something else." "Like what?" "Like our stars." But they barely noticed us as they walked through the courtyard to Dika's room. She gave us a little beauty queen wave and a soft smile. Mr. Lorenzo nodded at us and returned to his room. Angel and I stayed outside for a while, talking about distant celestial things. It seemed easier to talk about things hundreds of light years away. "I wonder if our stars have planets," he said. "I wonder if there's life on our planets," I said. "If there ever was life, if there ever will be." I must have fallen asleep on the plastic patio chair because sometime during the night, Angel woke me up and led me into my room. I sat down on the bed, groggy, and took off my sandals, watching Angel tiptoe out of the room and shut the door behind him. A few sparks lingered like a comet's tail, then disappeared.